Tales from the Tavern, The Wizard. Part 6. The icy grip of winter came with a vengeance. The ground was peppered here and there with fresh snow, and the treetops looked as if enshrouded in a white blanket. It was cold, dreadfully cold, and I frequently gave silent thanks that I was not unprepared. It had been many days since our trip to the town, and every minute I found myself more and more perplexed as to what the wizard's plans were for me. Was this my permanent home? Was this the life I should finally become accustomed to? The wizard spent most of his time poring over dusty books and experimenting with his strange contraptions. It mattered not to me. My foremost thought in my mind was my survival. And here I am. I have food, warm clothes, and debatably good company. Though I certainly missed my old life at times, my friends, my home, my village, I did not dwell on the matter too much, for such thoughts can make a man's mind so grim. Instead, I helped the wizard whenever I could, and he treated me well. We ate and drank together, had great conversation, and lived in peace. One day, I decided to make myself useful and produced firewood for the coming nights. It was late in the evening, and the light was fading quickly. I chopped and chopped, splitting wood with an eager fervor as if my life depended on it, because in fact it did. As I brought the axe to bear above my head, I heard a very faint sound coming from a distance. There were so many trees and such an abundance of snow on the ground that the sounds were extremely faint, but they appeared to be drawing closer. Then, I could see torchlight crawling through the tree line far down the road. My jaw dropped, but it did not prevent me from swiftly returning to the cottage and alerting the wizard. "Wizard, there are torchlights in the distance, and they appear to be coming towards us. What shall we do?" For the very first time, the wizard seemed to be concerned. He immediately put his book down and said,
"We may expect trouble and we may not, but for now I advise that you remain a bystander. Do not speak or do anything unless I say. It is very important that you heed my words. The situation could be dire."
I obeyed the wizard's request and slipped inside the cottage. I sat at the window, alert and full of anxiety. My eyes moved back and forth, taking in every detail. Every second seemed like an eternity. The torches were increasing in number, and the sound of voices and clanking armor grew. I wiped my sweaty palms on my trousers and reached for my tankard of ale. The tankard shook violently as I attempted to press it against my lips, spilling part of its contents on the floor. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve and continued to peer outside. They were very close, and I was now able to more clearly see who these individuals are. There were many soldiers, armed with spears, swords and halberds, wearing shiny armor and hardened leather. The other men, only a handful of them, wearing decorative robes, appeared to be directing these soldiers. They trudged through the snow, getting closer and closer until they were finally a stone's throw from the front door. The company stopped, and the soldiers immediately began to form a large semicircle. From the center of it, a man who was not one of the soldiers stepped forward. He stopped and stood motionless for quite some time, staring imperiously at the wizard and his cottage. Without looking, the man casually held his hand out to his side, and a soldier quickly handed him a weather-beaten scroll. The man unraveled the scroll, cleared his throat, and began to read.
"By order of the Church, and the authority granted to us as agents of the Inquisition, we hereby charge you, the Wizard of Scrimpleberry Forest, of the following crimes: heresy, witchcraft, blasphemy, jailbreaking, and corrupting the minds of the people with intention to incite rebellion. You have been found guilty of all said crimes, and therefore are sentenced to death. May God have mercy on your soul."
The man carefully rolled up the scroll and handed it back to the soldier. He casually brushed off the snow that had gathered on his shoulders and took a few more steps forward.
Well, wizard, are you going to come peacefully? While I much prefer the easier way, be not under any delusion that we are more than happy and quite competent at implementing much more persuasive means. You may fight. Yes, you may fight indeed. Though I do not deem that wise. I implore you to see reason in this matter. What say you, wizard?
The wizard stood on the porch, leaning on his walking stick and staring with a blank expression through the man's entire speech. Then he gave it a few taps on the ground, looked up and said,
I have never seen you, nor the likes of your companions. Yet you come here as judge, jury, and executioner. With whom do I even speak with? You bring many charges, yet how many of them can be accompanied by proof, I wonder. I will not come quietly or peacefully if the situation deteriorates. In fact, I will resist with all of my soul, with a great cacophony of noise and most violently, despite my reluctance to do so. Blood will be shed, and the majority of it shall originate from you and your henchmen, I dare say.
The wizard scowled and straightened his posture. The soldiers laughed nervously and shifted in their armor. The man looked back and glared at them. Then he returned his attention to the wizard and softened his expression ever so slightly. He put on a silky tone the wizard was quite so familiar with and said,
Oh, wizard, must you be so dramatic? Forgive me, for I should have identified myself upon our arrival. I am High Inquisitor Kenrick Foster, though I don't see how my name has any relevance in your current situation. For your intentions here are futile and bears no further inquiry. Even with your wretched sorcery, surely you do not believe you stand a chance against such overwhelming odds. What hope do you have against the faithful servants of God, armed with the sharpest English steel? If it is violence you see as your only choice, I assure you we shall meet your devilry with the point of a spear. Nevertheless, I shall let you speak your piece before we consign your soul to oblivion. What else have you to say, wizard? Be quick, for my patience runs short.
The wizard grimaced and gently tugged at his beard. His eyes intently focused on Kenrick, measuring him up. He clutched his walking stick with both hands and said,
High Inquisitor Kenrick,
the wizard said slowly with a sour taste in his mouth.
I have never harmed anyone, nor have I ever had the ill intent of corrupting the minds of the people. Tell me, Inquisitor, what kind of man produces medicine for the sick? To a man like you would say it is a foul concoction of sinister alchemy, but in truth, it is a product of the ingenuity of mankind that far surpasses any of the superstitious nonsense you find on any street corner, and even the revered intellectuals of the church. Why is it, Inquisitor, when a man outside of the graces of the church comes upon a marvel discovery that can benefit thousands, is considered heresy? Yet when a cleric of the church infests a man with leeches, it is deemed acceptable in the eyes of God. Your interpretation of the faith is nothing but a distorted, self-righteous display of ignorance. To this I say to you, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. Does your text not strike a nerve in you, Inquisitor? Can you not sense your blindness? You call me a sorcerer and a heretic, yet we both know I am none of the sort. I, too, am a man of God, but not how you would understand. Let me show you who I am. Let us break bread and exchange words over tea. Will you not come and join me in my home?
The Inquisitor raised an eyebrow. Then he looked back and spoke briefly with another man behind him, most likely an advisor of sorts. He locked his eyes with the wizard again and said,
Citing scripture? That is most interesting indeed. Though it goes against the advice of my most trusted counselor, I feel compelled to oblige your request. Whether we encounter an amicable arrangement or a regrettable situation, I trust the Lord that whatever may come is his will."
The wizard smiled, and the Inquisitor adjusted his robes and walked smoothly toward the cottage. It was at this moment that I realized the Inquisition was not here for me at all, despite being tangled in the messy web of the previous insidious clergyman. So I quickly left my place and positioned myself in the adjacent room, cracked the door open, and peered inconspicuously from the safety of the darkness. The wizard prepared tea for the both of them, and they silently sipped for a brief time, enjoying the warm liquid in their bellies that gave them respite from the bitter cold. The Inquisitor looked around, taking in every detail while rapping his fingers on the table. His expression ranged from curiosity to suspicion.
"Well, what have you to say, wizard? I can see that you have quite an assortment of oddments. Where have you come by such trinkets? From the pagans and devil worshippers in the Far East? Or perhaps they are relics from the Holy Crusades in Jerusalem?"
The wizard grinned broadly. He shook his head and placed his cup down.
"No, Kenrick, these are devices of my own making, though not all of my own design. I am perplexed that you immediately assume they are designs of pagans and devil worshippers, not to mention your contradictory belief that it could be of a holy origin. Tell me, if a technological marvel were to appear at your residence, would you assume it is of a holy, inspired origin? Or would you assume it is a contraption of godless heathens? Why can you not comprehend that it is possible a normal man of unremarkable stature can produce such a wonder? Wouldn't you say that it is possible that God can work through the most humble men, men of low standing and means, who have been gifted with incredible intelligence from God? Consider the fantastic marvel of engineering, the Temple of Solomon. If you were alive in that time, I suspect you would have burned half of the men who worked on that holy temple for heresy. For using technological tools and implements you did not understand. If, in your eyes, you do not believe it was sanctioned by God, you label it as heresy. Is this not true, Inquisitor?"
The Inquisitor sat still for a minute and looked quite perturbed but thoughtful.
"I see your point, wizard, though I find your assumptions quite insulting. Perhaps I may have committed this act in your hypothetical scenario, perhaps not. What I find interesting, though, wizard, is your constant juxtaposition of the faithful and the heretic. I believe all is sanctioned by God. His will determines our course that is plotted. If it is not of God, it must not exist, hence the importance of rooting out heresy and blasphemy wherever it is found in his name."
The wizard frowned slightly and waved his hand at the Inquisitor.
"My dear Inquisitor, I sit here as a man accused of godlessness and heresy, yet I dare say I believe I may have more insight into your faith than you yourself. Did God not provide us with the gift of free will? All man, whether good or evil, can do as he pleases. As such, man, whether heretic or faithful, can produce many wondrous things. Take the former pagans from the snow-capped mountains of Scandinavia or the deserts of the Holy Land. Did they not create beautiful works of art in the spirit of their culture, religion, and people? The architecture of Antioch, built by those of a non-Christian origin. Can you not see how the free will gifted to us by God exists not only in the Christian faith but is ubiquitous around the world?"
The Inquisitor sat hunched over in his chair, staring at his cup of tea. He looked up and gazed around solemnly, his eyes vacant and confused.
"Come with me, Kenrick. Let me display some of my trinkets to you. I think you may be pleasantly surprised. As you can see, I possess many things, medicine, tools, and many other marvels. Look here. This is a tincture of willow bark. It has been chemically synthesized to be vastly more potent. It can cure the mind of head pain, such as when you have consumed too much ale. Here I have a jar of black sand. When you connect a fire to its contents, it will erupt violently into a cloud of smoke, flame, and a loud noise."
The wizard continued to fumble around, while the Inquisitor gazed in awe at the things the wizard possessed.
And here is a tincture that is most interesting, synthesized, of course, through a complicated process. This substance here, with 2 drops a day, can prevent violent convulsions of individuals suffering from its disease, much like those who are possessed by evil spirits, as you may understand it.
The Inquisitor immediately put on a serious expression and snatched the vial out of the wizard's hand. The wizard protested, but the Inquisitor said,
Is this some trickery or witchcraft, conjurer? Does this substance really cure those of that particular affliction?
The wizard retrieved the vial and set it back in its place. He looked at the Inquisitor curiously and said,
Do you take me for a fool and a charlatan, Kenrick? Of course it does. I've only told you the truth, and I will continue to do so. Why? For what reason does this substance drive you to such passion?
The Inquisitor avoided the wizard's intense gaze. He walked slowly to the window and looked outside, lost in thought. Without turning his head, he said slowly,
I know of a person cursed with such an affliction. Someone very dear to me. It weighs on my heart like a stone. Yet the thought of reprieve for her from such an illness gives one hope. Would you allow me to take this medicine?
He turned around and looked directly into the wizard's eyes. His cold and confident demeanor was betrayed by his watery eyes and trembling hands. The wizard scoffed and said,
High Inquisitor Kenrick Foster, you are here to kill me. You come with fire and sword, yet ask for bread and ale. Nevertheless, I will give you what you desire. The pain and suffering you bring in your wake is a strong cudgel, yet the roots of love and kindness run deep. It is the aqua vita of the human spirit. However, I ask for only one favor in return. You and your people leave me be, forever. I'm not a bad man, nor a heretic. If you can agree to this, I will give you a large quantity of this medicine, enough to last many years. Accept my offer, Kenrick, and see the dark shadows that plague your heart washed away for better days.
The Inquisitor sat down and looked away. His hands clenched tightly together. Tears began to well up in his eyes and silently drop, staining the floorboards. Then he said with a slight tremble in his voice,
Yes, wizard. Yes. You are right. Since you have invited me in, I have not felt the slightest hint of evil or sorcery. I believe you are simply a normal man, blessed with an extraordinary mind. The Church was wrong. I may be crucified for admitting that, but if it means she can live a normal and happy life, I will gladly accept that burden.
The wizard put a hand on the man's shoulder, and they walked outside together. The Inquisitor gathered his composure quite quickly and once again put on his imperious and arrogant swagger. He strode out to his men and addressed them briefly. Then, to the utmost delight of the wizard and myself, they left without incident. When the flickering torches became nothing more than faint specks in the distance, the wizard turned to me and declared,
A chapter in our lives has closed on this night, and another has opened. Its pages are dry and eager for fresh ink. Tell me, my friend, what shall it say?